Hi everyone, welcome to today's Facebook Live where I'll be talking about listening. So I actually scheduled this live before I knew that last week's live would also be about listening, but I think they actually go hand in hand. So let's dive into it. Now, before I begin, I am Denise. I am a parenting coach here in Madrid, and I help other parents enjoy parenting more. So, for those of you who don't know me, now you do. And so today we're going to dive deep into listening. So, I actually put the title to be very general because for me, when people tell me that my kids don't listen to me, one of the questions I ask them is, do you listen to your child? Right? So today we're going to look into both ways of listening, of you listening to them and also them listening to us. So I'm going to focus actually more on us listening to our child. And so some of the things that I have here is when we listen to our child, I think I'd like, if there's one thing that you take away from this live, it would be to actually be more aware of how you are listening when you are listening to your child. And a lot of times, when we become more aware of it, we realize that we actually don't listen to our children as much as we think, and that we especially, not especially, but there are many times where we say that we're listening to them, but we're actually doing something else, which is obviously understandable. Like, I get it. I do the same thing. We're all really busy and we all have all these million things to do in our to-do list. But if we want that loving, respectful, open communication relationship with our children, not just now, but in the future, then we really have to start showing them that we are listening to them. And so these are some of the things that you can do when it comes to listening to your child, right? To our children. The first is to listen to understand, not to respond. And this means that when your child is telling you a story about the playground, you're not thinking about what you're going to say to them, right? You're not thinking about how they shouldn't have been playing with that child, or how they shouldn't have been doing this, or what were they doing in that playground in the first place, right? Instead, you're just listening to them, listening to their story. And, if you have questions, normally it would be, if you're really listening to understand, your questions would be to understand, right? It would be out of curiosity and not out of teaching. Which brings me to the second way that we can listen to our children is when we listen to connect and not to correct, right? Which is kind of similar to the respond. Going back to the listening to understand, not to respond, another way that this comes up is when we're listening and we're just waiting for them to stop talking so that we can tell them what to do, right? So we can, or tell them about our day, but normally it's about, so we can tell them to go brush their teeth, so we can tell them to go keep their toys, so we can tell them to go wash their hands. That's listening to respond. We're listening, waiting for them to stop so we can talk. While listening to understand is really paying attention to them. Okay, so listening to connect and not to correct is also very similar, right? It's about listening to build that relationship with your child, to just learn more about them. And it's not about thinking of all the things that they should have done, or they could be doing, or that you could be doing. It's just about really appreciating those minutes that they are talking to you, and just really, like, kind of like, the idea is like you kind of form like a bubble, if possible, and you are just there for them, listening and really letting them feel the love that you have for them. And another thing also is to listen to their nonverbal, because they might be saying all the words that you want to hear, but when you actually look at them and you look at their expressions, you look at their posture, you look at their hands, it's just, or even their tone of voice, when you listen for that, then you might pick up on things that you wouldn't have noticed if you weren't really listening to the nonverbal, right? If you weren't looking for that. And it's one of those things where, you know, when the kid comes home from school, and if you ask them, how was school today? And every day they say fine. But, you know, depending on the nonverbal, it really may or may not have been a fine day for them. So it's about also watching out for that. And related to that, related to listening to the nonverbal, is also to listen for their feelings and needs. If you are familiar with nonviolent communication, this is kind of like where it comes from, with the idea that we all have feelings, right? And underneath the words that we're saying, the things that we are doing, the feelings that we are feeling, there are needs that we are trying to meet. One thing, for example, that came up for me the other day was when I was with my daughter and I was trying to get home. It was lunchtime. And I was trying to cut, like, obviously the need at that moment for her was quite obvious, in the sense that she also needed physical comfort. It was quite hot. She probably needed food. But there was also this need, because we were leaving the playground and she didn't see the friends that she normally had. She had that need for community, for friendship, right? And I didn't notice that in the beginning because I was too focused on getting home. But when I really stopped and listened, right, and gave her that space and let her know, that's when I actually got down on her level and I looked at her and I expressed my empathy of how hard it is to leave the playground. And that's when she let out what was actually going on. And it wasn't that she didn't want to walk. It was that she was sad because she hadn't played with her friends, that she hadn't seen any friends that day. And so there's always, underneath the feelings, there's always a need, right? And so the idea is, instead of just meeting our children with where they are verbally, it's about going deeper. It's about really trying to understand what's happening to them underneath it all. Okay, so that's basically some tips to keep in mind when listening to your child. Okay, and now I know this is what you are actually here for. Why you're actually listening is, okay, great. What about my child to me, right? And so when it comes to tips or advice or suggestions about your kid and your kid listening to you, there are some questions I'd like you to answer for yourself, right? And then once you have the answers to these questions, it will probably become clearer to you what you need to do next. The first question that I want to ask you is, why do you want your child to listen? And go deeper than because I said so or because I'm their parent, right? What is it underneath that makes it important for you that your child listens? There is no right answer to this. I don't even want to give suggestions to answers to this, because I want you to come up with your own answer. But think about it, okay? Think about, why do you want your child to listen, right? And then also think about, what is your goal as their parent, right? What is it that you want to teach your child? And how is that related to you wanting them to listen, right? Are they aligned? Are they not aligned? And if they aren't, why aren't they, right? What can you do to make them aligned? Which of these is maybe more important to you? There's no right answer to this, but these are things that, like, once we get the bigger picture clearer, it makes it so much easier to realize what are our next steps. So these are the things for today. I'm not going to give more suggestions about encouraging your child to listen to you. I want you to instead answer those questions, right? Why you want your child to listen, and what is your goal as a parent? If you are dying to know specific tips on how you can encourage your child to listen to you, I will share in the link the video that I did last week, right? Which was basically a coaching call that I had with another mom. And we talked about that. We talked about how she felt her child wasn't listening to her and what she could do about it. Okay. And if now the thought of these whys, right, and these long-term thinking and these big picture thinking, if these are things that you've never thought of before, don't worry, you're not alone. And that is actually what I help parents do, right? I help you get clear on what are your big picture, what is your big picture idea, right? What are your family values? What are your long-term goals? What do you want in your relationship with your children in the future, right? And how can you start making that happen today? This is exactly what I help parents with. And so if you're interested in learning more about how that would look like in your life, then I highly recommend you send me a message to schedule a free consult. Until then, I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.